In the next episode of this series on strategy execution, we're focusing on why alignment does not equal coordination, as we unpack the alignment illusion. You've done the work, the strategy's clear, the teams know what they're here for, the leadership is aligned, and yet the work isn't flowing the way that it should. Are those dependencies being honored or ignored? Why are we having to drag people to cross-functional project meetings? And how can I start building some momentum on our strategy instead of spending hour after hour firefighting coordination issues? From vertical alignment to horizontal coordination. Welcome to your next leadership journey with the Hive. By now, if you've been following this series, you've probably come to accept that the strategy itself is not the hard part. You're clear on the direction. You've pressure tested readiness. You've had the first real conversations with teams about what a strategy means for them, specifically, not just for the organization in the abstract. And now a different concern is starting to surface because execution is not the document or the deck. It isn't the town hall. It isn't even a set of aligned leadership teams or a well-organized PMO. Execution is what people actually do across functions, under pressure, when no one's looking. And this is where very strong strategies, even with very strong leaders behind them, quietly fall apart as they fail to connect with reality. If you're watching this, maybe you are in that moment. Maybe you know it well. You've done everything right, but somehow you are missing that all-important momentum towards your strategic goals. Now, in this episode, I'm going to show you three things. First, why alignment and coordination are not the same capability and why confusing them is costing you. Second, what execution actually depends on and why most execution models stop short of the real answer. And third, a practical tool that you can use this week to build the cross-functional momentum that your strategy depends on. So we've looked at the research on execution failure, and there's a consistent picture that's emerging. Now, Harvard Business Review has shown repeatedly that most strategies don't fail because they're wrong. They fail in execution, specifically in the coordination of effort across functions that don't share incentives, don't share priorities, and don't fully trust each other to deliver. Now, we've explored this well in episode 1 and 2, but what we didn't talk about is what the research shows will work to get teams moving and moving together. Now, for this, we need to look at two important studies. Carl Weick's research on small wins, this was published in American Psychologist in 1984, showed something that every transformation leader needs to understand. Concrete early achievements do something that a vision statement never can. They reduce the perceived scale of the challenge. They build belief that the new way of working is actually possible, and they create momentum before the big results arrive to confirm that the strategy was right. Now, let's add to that Anita Woolley's research at MIT into collective intelligence. Now, this shows that the highest performing teams, they're not the ones with the highest individual IQ. They're the ones that communicate and think well together. So this is equal participation, this is social sensitivity, this is quality of interaction. These are the variables that predict performance, not the talent in the room. Now, all this research, for me, it's pointing at the same thing, that execution is not a technical problem. Execution is a social system, and particularly when you're bringing together cross-functional teams. You can't manage your way into a high-performing social system. You have to design it, and you have to facilitate it. When cross-functional coordination breaks down, I have seen so many leaders reach for structure We're talking things like a clearer race, a stronger PMO, more defined accountability, better project governance. And none of that's wrong. It's all useful, but it's being used to solve the wrong problem. And it's being used at the wrong time. Because the real reason coordination fails, even when everyone is aligned, even when everyone's committed, comes back to that statistic from episode 1, that only 9% of your managers fully trust colleagues in other departments to deliver. That number didn't change because you've had a great town hall. It didn't change because, well, you had a values conversation with the team. It didn't change through assertion. It changes through proof. And proof only comes from shared delivery. So how do you get there? How do you move a group of people from polite alignment to genuine coordination? Now, in the 1960s, David Gleicher developed what became known as the change equation. It's one of the most useful diagnostics in transformation leadership. I come back to it time and time again. I'd say most leaders I work with have only applied about half of it by the time we get there. The formula is this: dissatisfaction with the way things are. You multiply that by the strength of the vision, a compelling vision. Multiply that by the ease of the first steps. Now, all that must be greater than the level of resistance to the change that you're trying to lead. Now, all 4 of these elements matter. And I think most change programs get at least 2 of them wrong. I mean, your vision, okay, we start there, right? This is where we want to go. You need it. But episode 2 showed us that vision alone produces awareness, not desire. So the town hall lands, but Monday morning feels exactly the same. A compelling picture of the future is necessary, but it's nowhere near sufficient on its own. So let's look at dissatisfaction. Now, this is the one that I think most leaders underestimate, because this is all about dissatisfaction with the way things are that are felt by the people looking to deliver the change. Now, people aren't dissatisfied with the status quo of your organization just because the strategy says that they should be. People adapt. They adapt to dysfunction. They adapt and build workarounds. They learn to live with coordination failures and missed handoffs and silo walls. What creates genuine dissatisfaction isn't a market share burning platform. It's not pointing to lower profits. It's all about helping people to see how the current system is actively working against what they value. How the way things are is the reason why they're exhausted. How changing the way teams work together would relieve the tension that they've been carrying for years, not add to it. That's personal, that's specific, that's what moves people. So let's look at the ease of the first steps. Now, this is where Weick's research from before becomes critical. The first step in any cross-functional change needs to be small and achievable enough that we can win together. Now, this is not because you're lowering your ambition. It's because the illusion of momentum builds momentum. A shared win, however modest, does something that no vision statement can. It proves that this group can work together. And that proof is the foundation that everything else is built on. The final part of this equation is resistance. And here's what I think a lot of us leaders misread entirely, because resistance to cross-functional change isn't usually a conscious opposition. It's a rational self-protection. People have learned through experience that cross-functional commitments don't always get honored. That when priorities collide, their colleagues will protect their own patch. And that the risk of overcommitting to someone else's agenda is real. Now, I remember stepping up to champion my first transformation, and I was told by my outgoing boss not to try to be a hero. Now, I think she was worried that stakeholder resistance would wear me down, burn me out. Turns out she was right, but I delivered nonetheless. But I earned some grey hairs, and afterwards I took a big step back to understand what had worked, because a lot had worked, and what I needed to do differently next time. And what worked best was when the whole team took part in key events, really in line with our purpose, our values, and the mission that we were trying to achieve. And we won together. And I learned something really important, that resistance, it's not cynicism, regardless of how it presents itself. It's feedback, it's intelligence, it's insight. You don't need to argue people out of it. You can design it away through shared wins, shared milestones that prove the new way of working, the new social system, is safe and effective. Now, this change equation, dissatisfaction by vision, by ease at first step, being greater than resistance, this isn't just a formula, this is a powerful diagnostic. Most change programs focus almost entirely on vision. Some add a bit of dissatisfaction with a burning platform, but almost none design that first step carefully enough. And almost all underestimate resistance because they mistake silence for acceptance, or disengagement as obstruction. But run this equation on your current strategy rollout right now. Where are you weakest? That's exactly where your coordination efforts need to do the most work. Now, there's a link here to a free diagnostic to help you, and it takes just 2 minutes. So what does it actually take to make cross-functional execution work? The dominant execution frameworks, most organizations use things like OKRs, KPIs, balanced scorecards, and they all trace back to management by objectives. This is Peter Drucker's individual performance model from the 1950s. Individual performance model. They are extraordinarily good at measuring what individuals and functions deliver, but they are almost completely silent on what happens between them. And that silence, that gap in our thinking, that's where I see execution go to die. Because execution across silos isn't an individual capability problem, it's a collective one. So Albert Bandura spent decades distinguishing between 2 types of belief that drive human performance. Self-efficacy, so your belief in your own abilities to succeed, and collective efficacy, your group's shared belief in what you can deliver, what you can achieve together. Now, that distinction matters more than I think a lot of us leaders realize. You can have a room full of highly capable, highly confident individuals, each with strong self-efficacy, but still have a group that can't execute together, that don't have the collective intelligence. Because self-efficacy doesn't transfer to collective. Collective efficacy has to be built separately, and it's built in one way, through shared mastery experiences. That's through actually delivering something together and knowing together that you did it. Now, this is where Weick's small wins, that becomes the mechanism. Every shared milestone that your cross-functional team achieves, that's a mastery experience. Every public celebration of that achievement builds the collective belief that this group can succeed. And that belief, once established, that changes everything about how people work across boundaries. They stop protecting their patch. They start investing in shared outcomes because they have seen through experience that the investment pays off. Now, this is what we mean at the Hive when we talk about collective intelligence. It's not just smart individuals in the same room, but a group that has learned to think, to decide, and to deliver together. And a group that believes from experience that doing so produces results that none of them could achieve alone. Self-efficacy is believing that you can succeed. Collective efficacy is believing that we can succeed together. And the gap between those two beliefs is exactly where cross-functional execution either takes hold or it falls apart. You can't assert collective efficacy into existence as a leader. You can't just will it into place. You can't workshop it. You can't communicate it. You can only build it one shared win at a time. So let me show you what this looks like in practice. Meteogroup was a European-based data and analytics business with a big focus on weather and deep domain expertise. Their sales teams were extraordinarily skilled, but each team sold within their own domain, their own customer relationships, their own product set, their own definition of what a good result looked like. Now, the strategy of the business required something fundamentally different. They were looking for a portfolio approach. So this was cross-selling across domains, bringing colleagues from other parts of the business into conversations that previously owned alone. Now, while that's great for business, what it meant was asking highly skilled, highly successful people to initiate conversations that they couldn't close by themselves. Now that is an identity threat dressed up as a sales transformation. Because, well, think about it. Asking an expert to say, I don't know, let me bring in a colleague in front of a customer that they've owned for years, that feels like weakness. And in a culture that celebrates individual performance like sales, it is weakness until you change what you celebrate. The resistance that we experienced wasn't opposition to the strategy. Everyone understood the portfolio vision. Everyone agreed it made sense. The resistance was rational self-protection. Why would I risk my customer relationship on a colleague that I've never had to trust before? That's the 9% in action. And you can't train your way out of it. We tried. But what we found is that if we worked with the leaders to change what counted as a milestone, so not just closed deals, but forecast accuracy, pipeline quality, cross-domain conversations, colleagues were brought in, deals progressed into new parts of the organization, even when they didn't close immediately. Every one of these events, they become a shared milestone. That first breakthrough, that first collaboration. These are milestones that aren't shared by an individual, they are owned by the team that made it possible together. So the transformation that we led with Meteogroup wasn't about teaching people to sell differently. It was about making it safe to work differently. And safety in a sales culture comes from, well, one thing: knowing that the new behavior will be recognized and not punished. That the pipeline that looks smaller but is actually healthier will be celebrated and not questioned. That the deal that didn't close but moved the relationship forward does actually count as progress. And the leaders who committed to celebrating those milestones and publicly, who stood up in front of the teams and said, well, this is what progress looks like now, and well done to all of you who contributed to it. Those were the ones whose teams made the transition. And the result, well, it was extraordinary. It was a 4x improvement in average total order value per sales rep over 18 months. That's not bad. And not because the team got better at closing the same deals, but because they got better at trusting the new way of working. That the new way of working would be recognized. A new way of working that would create bigger and broader opportunities over time. And the trust that made that possible was built one shared milestone at a time, supported by an extraordinarily brave, committed, and consistent team of commercial leaders. So, what is this episode really all about? I mean, alignment is not collaboration, right? You need collaboration to execute a strategy. The gap between alignment and execution, well, then that's not a communication problem or a governance problem, that is a trust problem. And specifically, it's a 9% problem. And the only way to move that number is to design shared wins that prove to your teams through experience, not your assertion, that working together is worth it. Yeah. This is what we mean when we talk about execution as a social system. So the org chart, well, that tells you who reports to whom. The social system tells you who actually helps whom and why. And if you spent any time in systems thinking, well, you'll recognize what comes next. You can't change a system's output by pushing harder on its inputs. You change it by shifting what the system rewards. And in a social system, that means changing what gets collectively celebrated. The way I like to think about it is that your motivation of your team is only ever as strong as your celebration of your last milestone. If you reward success with more work, you create a negative feedback loop. People stop going beyond what's required. They stop taking the risks that cross-functional work demands. And execution quietly contracts back to what each function can deliver alone. Celebration, on the other hand, bringing everybody together to positively reinforce that win, that's not soft, that's the engine of sustained execution. So the question isn't, are we aligned? The question is, have we designed the shared wins that will prove to our teams, through experience, not assertion, that working together is worth it? At the Hive, in the Storm process, this is the primary focus for the momentum phase. So Storm gives teams a shared process for defining where they are, where they need to get to, what's in the way, and how they can move forward together. This momentum phase, this is where all that forward movement gets designed, not as a project plan, but as a sequence of shared wins and very clear ownership as to what delivers those wins. So we work with leadership teams to structure their execution around 3 levels: milestones, projects, tasks. And we embed alongside your teams as fractional facilitative leaders, facilitating the cross-functional coordinations and designing the execution system and building the capability into your leadership layer so that when we leave, your teams can sustain it themselves. So we help people work together better to deliver results that matter again and again. Now, as you know, with all these episodes, I like to leave you with a practical tool. So here's what you can do this week. 3 levels. This is how you organize cross-functional execution. And you can tie this into your OKRs and your KPIs, balanced scorecards, as you need to. You need to integrate it within the system that you're operating in. But you need to think about structuring things in these 3 ways. So first of all, milestones. These are the things worth collectively celebrating. These are the moments when something has been proven, something's been broken through, or something we've demonstrated at scale. It's a concept validated. It's a coordination barrier removed. It's a new behavior embedded. They don't have to be enormous. They just have to be shared. So meaning no single function could have achieved them alone. Now, once you've got your milestones clear, recognize that projects are the things that deliver on those milestones, and they are worth rewarding. So these are the work streams that cross-functional teams or individuals own. And they're designed to be, well, to hit those clear objectives that drive towards the milestones. So these are regular updates, clear owners and roles, progress is tracked and visible, teams deliver, then disband. Now, what makes up projects? Well, tasks. And these tasks are worth acknowledging but we're talking minimal tracking. This is the day-to-day actions that move projects forward. So they're individual, they're specific, they're the things that need to get done on Monday morning. Now that structure is simple. And all you need to do is take all the things that need to be done and organize them clearly into milestones, projects, and tasks, and then confirm that structure with really strong, clear milestones. And what makes it powerful is how you use it. If you sequence your milestones so that each one makes the next more possible, then a milestone ceases to be just a checkpoint. It becomes a proof point. And these proof points need to be ordered so that the belief that they build accumulates rather than resets. So with each celebration, you take that moment to recognize the progress and then reset your focus from how do we get from this milestone to the next milestone. Just make sure that your first milestone is small enough to win together. This is the low-hanging fruit. This is the easy first step. Now here's why this matters. If you go back to Gleicher's change equation, that first step needs to be easy enough to overcome that resistance. Not because you're lowering your ambition, remember, but because the illusion of momentum builds momentum. A shared win, doesn't matter how modest it is, it proves something that no vision statement can. That this group can work together, that collaboration is safe, that the effort that I put in will be reciprocated by my colleagues from other functions. Remember, your first shared milestone doesn't need to be a performance breakthrough. It can be something as straightforward as we've got clarity on the risks and trade-offs of working together as a cross-functional team. We're all on the same page about what this costs each of us and what we stand to gain. That's worth celebrating. Celebrate that. Because getting a group of people with competing priorities to genuinely understand each other's constraints and to say so out loud, that is not nothing. That is the foundation that everything else is built on. That's, you take the team out, you grab some beers, or alternatively, something a bit more inclusive, like going out for a shared lunch together or ordering in the pizza. Milestones are worth celebrating. Projects are worth rewarding. Tasks are worth acknowledging. And remember, your motivation of your team is only ever as strong as the celebration, the strength of that celebration, the strength of that positive reinforcement of that last milestone. So map your milestones this week and make the first one achievable together. Celebrate it loudly and collectively, and watch what happens to that 9%. So, 3 things to take away from this episode. First, alignment and coordination are not the same thing. Alignment tells you where you're going. Coordination determines whether you can get there together. You can have one without the other. And the gap between them, that's where strategies go to die. Second, the change equation is your diagnostic. Vision matters, but it isn't enough. Dissatisfaction needs to feel personal and relevant. It's not about profits. It's about the cost of the current system to the people inside it. Those first steps, they need to be designed to win. And resistance, remember, isn't cynicism. It's rational self-protection that only evidence can overcome. So run the equation on your rollout. We have a strategy rollout readiness report ready for you. It just takes 2 minutes to fill in, and then you get a free meeting with me where we can talk things through and make sure that you are clear on your next steps to bring your strategy to life. We'll look at where you're weakest, because that's where your milestones need to do the most work. Third, trust is built through shared delivery, not shared intent. Milestones are worth celebrating, projects worth rewarding, tasks are worth acknowledging. Make your first milestone small enough to win together, celebrate it publicly and collectively, because what you're celebrating isn't just the output. You're celebrating proof that this team, your team, can work together. The question isn't, are we aligned? The question is, have we designed the shared wins that can prove that we can execute together? Get people to stand up and name, this is our purpose, this is our target, this is our first shared milestone, but this is my project and this is my first task. From the big common purpose right down to the first thing Monday morning. Alignment by coordination, by momentum building. That's execution. Once you've got your cross-functional teams coordinating, once the shared wins are starting to land, well, another question emerges. Can you sustain the energy enough to see it through? Because I'll tell you what, this is what sucks about successfully leading transformation. The moment execution starts working, the moment the coordination's real, milestones are landing, that's also the moment that your team are most at risk of running out of the bandwidth necessary to carry the load. This is not because they're weak, but because they've been carrying the weight of change on top of a full operational load. And that comes at a cost. In episode 4, we're looking at the exhaustion signal, how to read the signs that your system is approaching its limit before it breaks, and how to lead through change fatigue in a way that builds efficiency rather than burning through your best people. From systemic burnout to energy efficiency, that's your next leadership journey with the Hive.